What is up, fight fans? Welcome to the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. I'm your host, Jordan Kurtz. You can give me a follow along online at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. We have a big show in store for you folks today, wrapping up last weekend's action as well as forecasting some of the things going on this weekend and talking through a more in-depth, I guess, scope of things on the rundown of headlines from the combat sports world over the course of the last week here. Real quick, though, I want to give a shout out to everybody at the Mile High Sports Network. There is no shortage of headlines going on in the core four sports, as well as everything associated with that. You have the SCO show with the Nilo. They are doing tremendous things right now. They've got their own signature beer that's out there. They've got, I believe it's a blonde that's out there from one of the local breweries. So make sure that you tune into them and check them out. Like I say, they're doing amazing things on that front with the college programming. CSU basketball is dancing. They made the tournament. They won the Mountain West Conference over the weekend. And, it's a big shout out to the Rammies up there in Northern Colorado, putting on for the entire state and going out there and joining the madness. You have all of the NFL off-season headlines that are going on right now. You have pro days. Combine is wrapped up, but we're getting into the free agency frenzy. There is pro days again, like we say. There is going to be pre-draft headlines and all of the stuff that's going on surrounding that. Make sure that you give all of these guys a look for any of the headlines or any of the talk surrounding all of that. I know the MHS Today show, they do a great job of covering all of those big sports topics. You have the NHL and the NBA gearing right up into the postseason. You have Major League Baseball in spring training. It's kind of sad for Colorado fans that the biggest headline that we have for the Rockies in spring training right now is a former independent pitcher who's now trying to make the team. And it's not necessarily because of him lighting up. He does light up the radar gun. I'll give him that. He's got a lot of velo, but he's making headlines because of his celebration when he strikes guys out, which is an ACL injury waiting to happen. I mean, I don't want to forecast bad things on a guy, but it's a terrible move. It's like when Martin Gramatica went out there and celebrated after kicking a field goal and blew his knee. Like, come on, man. Like, you got to keep the main thing. But that's just, again, we're talking about a guy's celebration for someone who is not a potential, major big league candidate. And that's the biggest headline coming from the Rockies camp this offseason. That's a problem if you are the boys down there on Blake Street, wouldn't you say? But we should move on along from that. Just want to give a big nod to everybody here at the Mile High Sports Network, whether that is on the podcast side of things, radio, internet, magazine, merch, all things associated. Give them a look. Hit that like, share, and subscribe wherever possible. Moving into the Colorado rundown here. If possible, please buy those tickets from fighters directly. If it's a paper ticket, that definitely helps them in terms of the direct exchange. You're also probably going to save a little bit in terms of online service fees if they do have a paper ticket. So keep those things in mind. But also, if it is something that's online, you're going to have the option to either put in a promo code or choose somebody on a drop down. In most cases, for those online point of sale systems, please do so. Please choose a fighter. If you don't know someone on the card, pick a name. It's going to help them. That will go toward their ticket commission. Going to give you a rundown of a few shows that are coming up or a few events that are happening across some of the combat sports in this Denver greater area over the course of the next few weeks. We have CJJC, Colorado Jiu-Jitsu Club. We're making our return to the Stampede on April 5th. That is going to be headlined by UFC veteran Josh Fremd. He's going to be taking on Tim Bargo. That's going to be a great card all the way through and through. We also have Bruno Nicoletti, a Brazilian Olympic wrestling team member. He's going to be taking on Alex Friedman. Alex Friedman is a collegiate wrestler who made it all the way through. I believe he was an academic All-American in college, and then has now since been a pro fight team coach. He's also a firefighter here in the Denver area. So this is going to be a couple of guys who are in top competitive shape, who are ready to go out there and put on a show for the crowd in the wrestling arts there. Again, these CJJC shows in the afternoons at Stampede, they're just a great atmosphere to go be a part of. It's fun. You go watch jiu-jitsu in a cage, see some submissions, some big slams, some work off of the fence. I'm all for it. Following that, you have Sparta with a double card affair going down the weekend of April 18th. That is going to be at the Eclipse Event Center here in Denver. On April 18th, you have a striking event. On April 19th, you have an MMA show. More details to come as far as that goes with the card, the lineup, so on and so forth from that in the coming weeks leading up to the show. On April 26th, we have 5280 Thai Fight Series making our return to the Stampede as well. It's a Muay Thai matinee. Any of those shows are always, again, pure entertainment from start to finish. Instead of this being a pure grappling show, you're going to have pure striking for this one over at the Stampede. If you want to see the Art of Eight Limbs, and we're going to have a couple of full rules Thai matchups. I mean, we're talking all 8 limbs, elbows all the way through and through. We're having a few of those matchups on this card. So you're going to see violence of the highest arts or the highest levels. So come check this out on April 26th there. There is also a teased announcement from Battle MMA Championships that they just put up a poster in the last couple of days of a new event that's coming for them at the Colorado Springs City Hub. So we will keep you updated when that show date gets announced for them. But just keep in mind that within the next few weeks, there will be another Battle MMA Championship show going down there in Southern Colorado. Transitioning over into the weekend recap. This weekend recap today is brought to you by Comments from the Peanut Gallery. This UFC Fight Night recap, this was a middleweight showcase. This was a rematch from a couple of years back between number 8 ranked Marvin Vettori taking on number 11 Roman Dolidze. Marvin Vettori won the first fight. This was a competitive back and forth matchup in this fight. Roman Dolidze gets the nod this time. In the future, do we ever see a rubber match? Who knows? The table is set for it maybe someday down the way. It doesn't make sense right away for these guys, I don't believe. I think that we're starting to maybe see a bit of a decline on the Vettori side, or not necessarily a bit. There has since, I mean, when we're taking all things into consideration, former title challenger who has now, he lost to the number 11 guy. Make of that what you will. That is a bit of a decline there. You have Roman Dolidze on the flip side, who is seemingly continuing to be on the ascent. Roman Dolidze in this matchup, I believe, showed more evolution from the first time that they fought, despite Marvin Vettori making some significant changes to his training. He has had some downtime. He's been away from the octagon for over a year, almost 2 years. However, that all being said, some of that was injury, some of that's changing camp, and we're also just talking at a certain point, you kind of are what you are. There is only so much evolution or growth that can be had when you have only what Marvin Vettori has. And I say that, and that may not be the best use of words there, but Marvin Vettori, I believe, got all of the juice out of that berry to get himself all the way to a title shot. And yes, he fell short in that fight against Israel Adesanya, but all things considered, for a guy who is not overly powerful, who doesn't have, one shot, one kill type of power to end the fight on any given strike, he's not a mauling wrestler who can take you down at will and just smother you for an entire contest. He's not a top tier submission artist who, all right, you start getting into, Hermanson type territory or wherever to where you can start to find these crafty things, or even say like a Roman Dolidze, who is an accomplished grappling specific world fighter who does have some crazy submissions and has had success against high level grapplers like Jack Hermanson himself. You're not talking about a guy who has those individualized skill sets and who is elite in any one of those types of things. We're talking about Marvin Vettori, who last week, and I love the feedback that I got from him, but he's like Sloth from the Goonies. He's a juggernaut type of fighter who is a brawler, who is just so tough that he was able to grind out wins against a lot of top tier guys. But that can only happen for so long. And especially when you're at the top of the ranks of the divisions, and then now there's that much more tape on you. There's that much more opportunities for these guys who are coming up to prepare for your style. And after a bit, if you're not evolving or if you're not unlocking new layers and channels within your game, eventually you're going to start to get figured out. And then in some cases, like Marvin Vettori, I don't know what more you can really do when you're working with the physical tools that he has. Yes, you can have some technical refinement, but against, again, the top of the division, we're going to start getting into the category of we're saying, okay, at best, he's fighting 50-50 fights. And if he's fighting 50-50 fights, well, put two names up on the wall, throw a dart at it. That's going to be the better shot at picking who's win versus taking a statistical analysis here. Roman Dolidze, again, though, I think that he's a guy who is kind of a dark horse in the division. I don't know that he will ever achieve that title consideration. I know that he's inching his way toward the top 5. He's got a lot of tremendous skill. But when I start looking at some of the guys in that title contender picture, do I see him beating Khamzat Chimaev? No. Do I see him beating Dricus du Plessis? No. Do I see him beating Sean Strickland? I think there could be some potential opportunities and routes of victory, but they're teammates. They train together at Extreme Couture in Vegas. So does that impact whether that matchup ever happens? Tough to see. Does he beat a Jared Cannonier? Does he beat some of these other guys, at this stage right now? I don't know. It's tough to tell. And then if we're looking at other guys who are maybe outside of the top 5, but creeping up in that direction, I think that if you threw Roman Dolidze and Kyle Bahalyo in right now, I think the Fighting Nerds product probably gets him. So yes, do I think that he has wins that he could go out there and get against ranked guys or guys who are being pushed in that direction? I think he could beat your Rainier DeRitters, Bo Nichols, Paul Craig, some of those guys in the fold. But I do think that there's a lot of guys who bring some very troubling tactics toward Roman Dolidze. In the co-main event, we had Chidi Njokuani continue to run at full bang steam forward at welterweight. He's undefeated since he went down to 170 pounds. Elzo dos Santos has been a guy who has pretty much been a brand name recognition type of product at 170, as a guy who what you're getting, a veteran who comes to scrap every single time. However, Chidi Njokuani in this fight went out there in top tier form and continues to excite. This is a guy who's fought across multiple different divisions. He's had such a journey throughout his martial arts career that I love seeing some of these guys who he falls into that kind of Dustin Jacoby category of he had some success early on and then, ran into some top tier guys and had to kind of take the wayside route, went and fought on a couple of other big organizations out there in the world, fought on the regional scene, made his way back up, gets to contender, gets into the UFC back into his 30s and continues to go on a run. The UFC doesn't take a lot of chances on some of these guys who are in their 30s, but I think that Chidi Njokuani is another example of why they can't completely write off some of these vets who, especially once they get into their early to, maybe early stages of the mid 30s, and they don't have necessarily a sparkling record, but they fought a lot of tough guys in the process. We're seeing fighters who fit that mold who are having a lot of success in the UFC. And we mentioned one of them just now with Dustin Jacoby, but then we also have another example of a guy who it took some short notice type of circumstances. It took the pandemic for Chidi and for Dustin. It took special circumstances on the short notice for someone like Chepe, who he's gone in and he's 5-0 now in the UFC, and he's doing it in spectacular fashion and going up against tough opponents and just beating them in their game and in their style. Victor Henry being another guy who, he's had some wins, some losses, but he's came in against very good fighters and shown that, yes, I do belong here. There are those guys who are out there that exist on the regional scene or in other organizations who can come in and win fights right now in the UFC, but maybe they ran into a small skid, or they dropped a couple of fights when they were on the cusp on the regional scene, because every fight when they were in those LFA or Fury or CFFC co-main and main event fights was a contender series type of level fight. Every fight was something that was tough, and they were taking hard challenges because they knew if they were to perform in those opportunities, they could potentially get the call. There are a lot of those guys who exist out there. There is a ton of them who are right here in this Denver community right now. So I think that that just speaks to, sometimes you can't get completely lost in the sauce of seeing some young hot prospect who has an unblemished record. You got to take a look at the resume a little bit deeper sometimes, and you got to see that, you know what? Yeah, he may have a few losses as we're approaching this potential UFC call, but who were those two? And we're going to talk about another one of those guys here in just a minute. But moving along, working through this card here, Kevin Vallejos picks up a spectacular knockout victory with an overhand. The young Argentine prospect knocks out Sung Woo Choi, who has fought a lot of high caliber veterans in the featherweight division. This young kid, he's a star on the rise. His only loss is to John Silva. We all know that Gene Silva is one of the most terrifying prospects right now on the UFC roster. And we'll talk a little bit more about him as well later on in the program as he approaches this fight with Bryce Mitchell. But he wants that fight back. And you don't see too many people calling for Silva in that way. Yeah, sometimes you got to be careful what you ask for. Following that, another fighter out of the Denver area, we have friend of the program, Alexander the Great Ape Hernandez, took on Ultimate Fighter veteran, Ultimate Fighter champion, that I should say, in Kurt Holobaugh. This was a fight of two gritty, grizzled veterans who just went out there, and it was going to be a matter of a war of attrition and who was able to outlast, outwit, outwill, outskill the other. And this night happened to go to Alexander Hernandez. That's putting a couple of wins together for him. He is, he was able to escape this one. As far as the fight goes, nothing major in terms of injury, whatever, from the fight. But Alex did mention in the pre-fight buildup as well as in the post-fight press conference that it may be a little while before we see him back in there. He's got some disc issues that are going on in his neck, and that did affect some of his training. That did affect some of his approach within the fight. And for anyone out there, any of the fighters, we always wish you a speedy recovery from these things. But especially for those who are close to the program and who we have a personal attachment to, not only just for fighting, but for life. We hope that those things get set out. Your neck is not something to be messed with, and to go out there despite having some of those limitations, I think that was a very encouraging performance for Alex, to know that he was out there to go in there against a vet who wasn't just going to go away. I know he wanted to go stunt and put him out right away, but for him to have the confidence in back-to-back fights against guys who are tough as an old leather boot in Thud Hubbard and then in Kurt Holobaugh, to go out and have a couple of dog fights, if you will, that has to be empowering to his own personal confidence and growth going forward, especially for someone who at times has all of the tools, but would get stuck with paralysis by analysis because he is such a such an IQ or an analytical guy and thinks through every little probability. Sometimes in fighting, you just have to go, and the guys who think so much or who have so much technical acumen, they get a little bit stunned in the moment. And I think for Alex to then battle through some of those hurdles that he's placed on himself throughout his career at times, as well as he's also at points been a front runner, a sprinter, if you will, a very explosively powerful, fast twitch muscle fiber guy who, it's not just him, it's guys who have that type of body type, and that's what their output and explosion is. Sometimes that think of it in this sense, a cheetah is not built to run a marathon, right? But on the same side of things, that animal that is used to traversing thousands of miles is not going to go out there and win a sprint. It's just two different body types and two different mechanisms biologically. But the growth and the evolution, again, the IQ and the the presence right there to stay in the moment in the fight, using footwork, using angles, figuring out the timing on the level change for the takedowns. Those were all examples of growth that Alex had to be able to go out there and put together again another victory against a grizzled and decorated veteran in Kurt Hollabaugh. Damon Blackshear against Cody Gibson. You have Damon Blackshear, who came into the UFC. He had a draw fight against Yusuf Zalal, but also has had highlights like a twister finish and has had some other big fights underneath the banner. You have Cody Gibson, who was in the UFC early, went back to the regional scene, makes his return via the Ultimate Fighter season, same season that Kurt Hollabaugh was on, the Veterans versus Prospect series with Connor and Chandler. Goes out there and was the runner-up of that season. He is a very skilled and talented veteran. I think that there were a couple of instances in this fight, though, where he shot himself in the foot. They were a couple of mistakes on the IQ side of things where I felt that he was having success and then he diverted from it. And why would be a great question. I just couldn't tell you why. That's only something that they could answer. But sometimes that's the difference of those veterans who are really good fighters, but sometimes in the moment, those 5-second decisions, those little things right there in the moment, that's the difference of them being a good fighter and being a great fighter. Maybe it's in the moment you have somebody a little bit rocked and stunned on the feet, and instead of staying patient and being a sniper and finding that finish and having the highlight reel knockout or getting that TKO and finishing the fight right there, you get a little bit of ants in the pants and you shoot a takedown or you shoot a shot. And then in essence, you're giving that person time to recover, or if you don't off of that shot immediately secure the ground and pound or a submission finish, then it just kind of negated the work or the damage that you did on the feet. And sometimes if you don't end up winning the fight, then you only have yourself to look back and think, man, what would have been had I had a little bit more patience or presence right there in the moment instead of just rushing it. It's always a hindsight being 2020 thing. Who knows if he's able to find that final shot, if you will, on the feet where he has Blackshear up against the fence. Maybe it doesn't happen, but that's something that we will never know. I do believe, though, that he missed an opportunity when he had that sequence. Opening up the fight, you had Su Young Yu taking on AJ Cunningham. This was an underwhelming performance from AJ. He would say so himself. He posted on his social media that he said for the first time in his career, he felt like he just froze. Said that he had never really experienced what some other fighters had said in the past of, I just didn't really feel it, or I wasn't there, whatever, if you will. And he said he attributes to this is his words. He says that it was karma for him always believing that that wasn't a real thing. But he said then in the moment, though, he found himself just kind of stuck and couldn't really get going. Hopefully AJ gets an opportunity to get back in the cage and turn this ship around and get his first UFC victory. He's a tremendous story out there. If you know anything about the kid, you can go look him up, and then to know what kind of adversity that he's gone through in life, to see the person that he is when you interact with him, it's nothing short of a miracle within himself. So again, I hope that he gets another opportunity. Talking about a couple of fights here on the prelims before we move along to our next topic here. You had Waldo Cortez Acosta. He's the number 12 ranked heavyweight. He picks up a win, TKO victory against Ryan Superman Spann, who's moving up to heavyweight. I don't know what this win really does for Acosta. He knocks out a light heavyweight who's moving up to heavyweight. He's in the top 12, but that just speaks to something that we have been just hammering the head over and over, and it's a dead horse at this point. It's not just a dead horse. It's making squishy sounds. The heavyweight division is terrible right now. There are just over 30 on the entire roster, and the large majority of them are skill for skill garbage. They're just not good, and especially historically compared when you go back and look at the heavyweight division in its entirety, whether it was the Pride era to Strikeforce era, Dream, earlier days of the UFC. this is just abysmal. And we're looking at it across all promotions worldwide. You maybe comparatively have a top 5 or 6 that is actually world-class level, if you will, comparatively speaking. And that might be a stretch. Want to give a shout out to Sam Page Hughes. Sam goes out there and gets another victory. You know, she's the hype killer. She's the female hype train killer. She's the equivalent right now in the women's division of what Christian Rodriguez is doing. Christian Rodriguez talked about it in a recent interview that he's embracing that moniker that the fans have given him as the hype train killer in the UFC, fighting a lot of these up and coming, either undefeated or highly touted prospects. That's what Sam Page Hughes has been doing. Sam goes out there and she was able to give the honor to Saif Saud of Fortis MMA down there in Dallas, his 100th UFC victory. So congratulations to Sam Hughes. You know, Sam is a rider, friend of the program. She's been a friend ever since the LFA days. So congratulations to you, Sam, for going out there and continuing to rise to the occasion. One of the highlights of the night for me was Carlos Vera going out there and getting that spectacular rear naked choke finish against Josias Musasa. That sequence, though, was started by an explosive head kick. He lands the head kick, goes chin to chin, big impact, drops Usasa, immediately takes the back, gets the forearm underneath the chin, and sinks in the choke. I mean, I just, you have to love the story. Again, another veteran who was able to make his way into the dance later on within his run, and Carlos Vera, he came through the tough ranks. So congratulations to him as well in the process. And then I think another highlight that we have to, just 2 highlights on the way out that we have to discuss. One of them was a little painful on the local front, but the other one was just flat out spectacular. You had Josiane Nunes taking on Priscilla Zombie Girl Cachoeira. Zombie Girl went out there in vintage fashion. She's had some up and down fights. There's been some scraps where she's been on the other end of getting brutalized and getting knocked out and submitted. But then she's also had a few of these spectacular finishes. That knockout, we don't typically see that type of finish, eyes open, rolled over, the way that Josiane Nunes was. But we're talking about going right into the thick of things with NHL postseason, right, ladies and gentlemen? We just came off the heels of what was that game Danny called, like the Four Nations or something like that? I'm not a hockey guy, but I watched
the Four
highlights.
Nations tournament was big. Canada, U.S.
Yeah, that was one where they
Sweden,
had all the fights,
Finland,
right?
I believe. Yeah. Oh yeah, U.S. and Canada were going at it.
Yeah, exactly. So this knockout was, this was almost like a hockey style knockout where she had the collar tie and just an uppercut that came right from underneath, face to canvas, flatlines her, eyes open, staring up at the lights. Spectacular finish. Then also you had Carly Judice picking up a head kick knockout. That was, that was, again, a fun fight to watch. You had a prospect who had one of the most devastating one-punch knockouts on the Contender Series in Genesi this last year on Contender. And then Carly Judice comes in and picks up a victory over her. And this fight picks up a spectacular highlight reel head kick. Both of these ladies have a lot of future. They're young, they're early in their run, and I'm excited to see what's going forward with them. Talking about a couple of other events in the combat sports world, you had King Callum Walsh in the boxing world adding another highlight reel first round walk-off knockout. That's to add to a mantle of highlights and titles along in his run. You had Austin Jones, friend of the program. Osmosis wins that Midwest Championship fighting welterweight Colorado title. Jason Scott wins in the main event via triangle. You had Jacob Cochran of Say's MMA becoming the new Midwest Championship amateur 125-pound champion. That was a scrappy fight between him and Jared Huerta, both 2 guys who have a lot of future in this game. Anthony Stack, the little but bigger brother of our friend of the program, and Michael Stack got himself a first-round finish. Also want to show some love to Robert the Real Deal Trujillo. He became Power Slap World Champion. Robert's originally from Raton, New Mexico, but does his training out of Warrior Built MMA down there in Pueblo. He's fought for multiple shows that I've been involved in under both the Colorado Combat Club as well as Top Shelf Entertainment banners. So congratulations to you, Robert, going out there and winning a title in that endeavor there. I know it's been massive for your personal brand with the exposure and being able to be on those platforms and becoming the Power Slap World Champion. And for those who try to hate on Slap, hey, it may not be your cup of tea, but recognize that it is a product that is growing massively out there in the space. And I've had it shared with me from some of the people who are in the know numbers wise that they're actually digitally, they do some of the numbers that that you would never even imagine. Like hearing some of the things, like I can't share some of the inside baseball things that have been thrown my way, but what I can offer is that the take rate digitally that they have, especially within certain demographics and parts of the world, is insane. So that's only going to continue to grow. And hopefully that's a very prosperous opportunity for those guys who are choosing that route. Because if you have no option for defense and you're taking straight brain damage, I hope that you're getting paid as the time grows. Moving along from that, we're going to talk this week's UFC Fight Night preview. The UFC is going back across the pond. This is going to London. We are going to see a welterweight showcase, 2 top 5 contenders. You have a former champion. You have a guy who has title aspirations in his future. You have Leon Rocky Edwards coming into the contest with a 22-4 record, taking on number 5, Sean Brady, with a 17-1 record. They both have a mutual opponent in the current champion, Bilal Muhammad. Leon obviously has the 2 fights. First fight that had the eye poke situation, then loses his title to Bilal. And then you have Sean Brady, who Sean Brady's only loss was the standing TKO to Bilal. I think that this is a very difficult matchup for Leon Edwards if he cannot keep the fight at range. If Leon Edwards is able to fight his fight, which this is going to sound disrespectful, but it is what it is. Leon, to me, isn't the most exciting style of fighter when he's at his best, because he fights at range and he's more of a point type of style. Yes, he does have the highlight reel knockout, the head kick heard around the world against Kamaru Usman that blew him up into superstardom. But if we turn the clock back to before that fight, the narrative around Leon was always that, yes, he is a very skilled fighter who is on a tremendous run, who just wins. And some of those were point fight decisions. Some of those weren't the most illustrious type of fights. However, he knows how to win and continues to figure out these crafty veteran ways. But he's not exciting. His numbers aren't big on social media. You see the draws that he had. I remember we talked about it on the program, Danny, even back then, about that week of him when he was going into the title fight and the discrepancy of what his pre-fight media was for the views online, as opposed to what Kamaru as the champion, as well as some of the other undercard fighters were. There was just, in their interviews, there was such a discrepancy of what people were interested in for Leon prior to him having that head kick knockout. That changed the entire narrative to Leon Rocky Edwards. That speech from his coach, and for him to go out there and rally in the 24th minute of that fight, that really kind of reinvigorated people. But then since then, he has the fight that he defends the belt against Kamaru that goes to a decision. But again, a tactical fight where he goes out there and out wrestles a guy who we had never seen that done before. Hey, credit to him there. But then we see the fight against Colby, and people said, oh, this isn't the most exciting fight, fairly boring, blah, blah, blah. Colby finishes on top, so on and so forth. And then the fight against Bilal, where he loses, and then there's kind of a bunch of excuses that come from the camp that, oh, he was hurt, he had been sick, he was at 30, 40%, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Let's just not be disappointed or not be too surprised if we see Leon Edwards not have the most spectacular or entertaining performance against Sean Brady, especially a Sean Brady who is a menacing grappler and is a submission specialist. Right now, those boys in Philly over the course of the last couple of years have been on a tremendous run, whether it is him to Sabatini to Joe Pyfer, Andre Petrosky. All of those guys are dogs. And when you're in the mix of top grapplers who are very good wrestlers and are just mean, I guess, for, and kind of a page of yesteryear, they've got a lot of blood and guts bro to them, if you will. There's a little bit of lion's dead bravado. You know, we're going to go in here and we're going to chew this pig iron and we're going to hit the wrestling rounds hard and we're going to squeeze your neck and crank your face and bust your jaw, whether we have the neck or not. They have a lot of that to them. They're just a gritty, gutsy. When you imagine what is that just hard blue collar Philly type of mentality, that's those guys. That's that grit and guillotines type of mindset that they have. And I wouldn't be surprised that Sean Brady goes out there and finds a way to finish Leon Edwards in this fight. Now, it could very well go the opposite way. And especially Sean Brady, his weakness does tend to be on the feet. If Leon is able to put something in his face and he puts a couple of hard strikes on that nose that we've seen broken a couple of times, yes, it could very quickly shift directions. However, again, Sean Brady can get inside, and then once he gets inside, he gets him to the canvas. It's a wrap. In the co-main event, you have a light heavyweight matchup between Jan Blachowicz taking on Carlos Ulberg. Jan Blachowicz believes that this is a fight that if he wins, it puts him in a position to have a title fight rematch against Magomed Ankalaev. Originally, that fight went to a draw, no title when the belt was vacant after John had left. That was, or excuse me, that was after Yuri had gotten hurt, I should say. It's a tough situation, right? Because I don't know that Jan necessarily slides himself in there outside of an immediate Polish power highlight reel devastating knockout where Ulberg is left collapsed like the toys in Toy Story when Andy walks in the room. I think that's the only way that he surpasses Alex Pereira, the biggest cash cow superstar on the UFC roster right now, the biggest draw that the UFC has on the roster right now. The only way that he surpasses him is with some sort of crazy performance in that respect, and Alex is unable to go. Otherwise, he's sitting behind that rematch, one way or the other. Ulberg, on the flip side, then has the chance to go put himself in the top 3 and continues to work his way up the division. He doesn't get a title shot, no matter what. I don't see there's any world where Ulberg ultimately surpasses him there, which just circles us back to the overall talk of where that division overall, outside of Pereira, there's not really a front runner or a big star in that division. You have Kevin Holland making a quick return against Gunnar Nelson. I think this is a terrible matchup for Kevin Holland. Who in the hell is managing Kevin Holland's career, and why would you let him go out there against Gunnar Nelson? We have seen Kevin Holland struggle recently against accomplished grapplers. Yeah, he could probably go out there and outstrike Gunnar, but again, where's Kevin's head at? How much growth has Kevin had from the last fight where he went out there and got submitted? Against these really talented and just elite grapplers, Kevin has a black belt, but it doesn't show in these matchups. He got blood filled within his eyes against Khamzat Chimaev. He got choked out by Rainer de Ritter. And yes, those are either champions or menacing top-tier future champion prospects. I get that. But Gunnar is no slouch. Yes, Gunny has had some away time. He's dealt with injuries and lots of things outside of the cage that have prevented him from competing frequently. But again, this is not a good fight for Kevin Holland at all. I would lean Gunnar Nelson by submission in this fight. If you are feeling froggy out there, I don't know what the lines are because I don't bet. But if you're feeling froggy, go find that line out there. I guarantee you that if you find value, that will give you a nice little bag on the turnaround. Talking about another couple of fights here on this card before we move along. Opening up the main card, you have Nathaniel Wood, the prospect. He is taking on Morgan Charrier. Charrier, talented French prospect who I think is one of the more well-rounded guys coming out of France. A lot of them are typically very heavy kickboxing leaning in terms of their style, like to kind of point fight, be at range, use their footwork. But Charlie, he'll mix it up and he'll grapple. I don't know that he has the sauce to be able to overcome Nathaniel Wood. Nathaniel Wood is a guy who came into the UFC out of Cage Warriors, a champion in the regional scene with very high aspirations and people thinking that he has the ability to go on and make a run someday. has had some ups and some downs, has ran into some injuries, unfortunately, in the process and some health situations. But he is a tremendously talented fighter, and him in front of that home crowd, I look for him to have a very inspired performance, and give me Nathaniel Wood in that matchup. A couple of other fights on the prelims. Again, for this being a fight night card, I think that you are being treated to a lineup of highly competitive matchups, especially when we look at them all on paper. You have the meatball Molly McCann that's on the card. Always going to be a crowd draw, whether she wins or loses. I mean, this is not a good matchup for her either. She's taken on an 11-1 prospect in Alexia Thanara. Not a good fight for her. But again, anytime that the meatball's in the mix, she's going to get the crowd going, especially if she pulls off a win. That crowd is going to be jumping and they will blow the roof off of that arena. Jai Harbor is taking on Taco Padilla on the prelims in the main event there. Chris Taco Padilla in his last fight, tremendous highlight reel knockout. Bonus winning performance, one of the top finishes of last year. He's taken on a guy who's fought some of the tops of the top in the division, or I guess he was a 45er then, had the one fight at 55 before going back to 45 and winning the title. But Jai Herbert has fought Ilia Topuria at 55. Looks to be an exciting matchup. A kid who is undefeated, who punched his ticket into the UFC with a sensational knockout, potentially knockout of the season on Contender Series this last year. Loner Kavanaugh takes on Felipe Dos Santos. That's a flyweight matchup that is going to be fireworks from start to finish. Loner Kavanaugh is a sprinter. You want to talk about a fast twitch type of guy who wants to punch your lights out and put your head in the top row of the arena? That's Loner Kavanaugh. That's a star in the making right there in the flyweight division. You have a ranked heavyweight matchup between Marcin Tybura taking on Mick Parkin. You have Chris Leroy Duncan taking on Audrey Pulaev. A matchup that this one, I mean, you're not going to see top tier skill, but you are going to see, Danny Q, the disturb, down with the thickness in Shauna Bannon and Pooja Tomar. That's all cakes. That's for the guys. That's one where have you a little bit of eye candy, then go get some vitamins in the process. And then opening up the card, this fight, man, it's listed as number 1 on the bout sheet, but this could very well be a fight of the night contender. You have Guram Kutateladze, the Georgian Viking, who's taken on Kwawe Fernandez. Kwawe Fernandez, a standout from the LFA ranks, taking on a guy who has went in there and mixed it up with some of the tops of the top, had a fight of the year performance against Batush Gamrot a couple of years ago. This is a matchup that, again, like I say, for it to be early on the card, this is why you need to watch the prelims. Guram has had some ups and downs with a couple of his last fights and has had some health circumstances that has kept him from competing as frequently as he would have liked to, as well as some visa issues in the process at times. But a very talented fighter who wakes up and chooses violence. Also fighting this weekend, you have Ryan Coconut Mandala. He's out of Merck's Jiu-Jitsu in Colorado Springs, originally out of Hawaii. He's fighting for Fury FC this weekend. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, I don't care what show it is. He's a scrapper who flat out brings it every single fight. Don't let the record on paper fool you. This guy's been in there with some of the who's who of prospects that are on route to or are already in the big show. If you take a look at his resume, again, we spoke about it earlier on the show. Resume matters. He's fought everyone from undefeated Luis Grim-Goulet, Ramon Tavares, Cameron Smotherman, all in the UFC. Undefeated rising prospect Dominique Herrera, and the now 8-2 Abdul Kamara, who is on the cusp of getting a call. That all matters. This also leads us to believe that his opponent, the undefeated Sebastian Oyerverdes, who has a 100% finish rate, all by armbar submission, is potentially a guy. The only pro loss on Sebastian's Tapology resume was to Cameron Malott, who's a Tom DeBlas brown belt, who, if you aren't familiar with the grappling specific world, that's one of the top professors here in the States and is recognized worldwide as one of the top dogs in the grappling world. One of his brown belts at a pro grappling match a couple of years ago. So Sebastian is potentially a guy. This is going to be another tough test for Coconut. But again, anytime that you see him on the bill, it's going to be a tough matchup for whoever it is. He's going to bring the fight. Moving along from that, we are going to talk about a couple of headlines. Again, there's been a lot of stuff that went on over the course of the last week. Then we're going to go 3 rounds, close out the hour for you. We're running a little quick on time, but we're going to run through some of these headlines here just because there's some of these that have some crossover mainstream and pop culture, for some of the old dogs out there who might remember this movie. Danny, I don't know how many young kids have ever seen Rocky V. Probably not many, right?
Probably not.
It's kind of the black eye of the entire Rocky franchise, especially of the original 5 that was on almost all lists listed as the lowest on there. But again, it's still a part of one of the most successful movie franchises of all time. You have Kenzie Morrison, who looks to make his father proud in the bare knuckle fighting championship ring. His dad was Tommy Morrison, a decorated pro boxer who had fights against guys like George Foreman at one point in his career, and then went on to star as Tommy Gunn in Rocky V. A lot of controversy and things on the way out, and the unfortunate death for Tommy Morrison. But his son is now risen in the ranks and is looking to just to make his dad proud, to carry on and have a successful career himself in the boxing ring. Ian Machado Gary, he was on headlines all over the place in these MMA outlets, saying that he was basically stunned at the UFC's decision for the welterweight title fight matchup that's going on between Bilal Muhammad against Jack Della Maddalena. He said, and this is all coming directly from Ian Gary's statement via his social media. He says, "Why aren't I fighting for the title? I had a chat with my agent. I rang him, and when he told me about this news, I was livid. I still am to this day. I had a #1 contenders fight where the guy, Shavkat Rakhmonov, now has to get knee reconstruction and is out for a year. But it's not my fault. I didn't do it. I didn't stab his knee 20-something times and boot the leg off. I'm not fighting for a world title because I'm coming off of a loss, and they're giving it to a guy who's been injured for a year, and they think that's more exciting, but they're wrong. The world title fight was meant to be Shavkat Rakhmonov taking on Bilal Muhammad, but Shavkat is apparently out injured. I wonder what happened. Now they're pulling in a guy who hasn't fought in a year because he's had an operation on his forearm because he broke it in his last fight and hasn't fought in a long time and hasn't been active. So they're just going to give it to Jack Della Maddalena because I'm coming off of a loss. That's okay. Don't worry. I'll get you all. You're all mine. I get that he has to plead his own case. I do. And you know what? After that performance that he had against Shavkat, I gained tremendous respect for Ian Machado Gary. He showed that he's got that dog in him. But listen, idiot, you answered your own question. You're coming off of a loss. Yes, Jack has been away with the layoff in an injury that was coming from a win, but he is also on a 17-fight win streak. He's more exciting than you overall. And to quote the great Kid Cudi, it's as simple as that for that simple ass. Moving along to another headline that this has been one that in its different legs of the person and his stories and antics has so many different just lightning rods of controversy and people after him in so many different ways. Went from being a fan favorite, if you will, that kind of right now he's Voldemort. He's kind of the guy who most people don't want to have a direct sort of hand because of some things that happened. Bryce Mitchell has came out and said that he's been visited by a legion of demons every night in his sleep since his press conference confrontation with his opponent, Gene Silva. He said that Silva is possessed by evil spirits and that as soon as he mentioned Jesus, that's when Silva started barking at him and saying F him. And every night since, these legions of demons, along with temptresses of lust, are visiting his dreams that are playing on his two biggest vices, which are rage and lust. Mitchell being a very Christian-based philosophical person in terms of his ideology and the way that he says, he's tempting me with the two biggest things from the Bible that tempt me, and this rage and this lust, blah, blah, blah. And he's sending people to want me to try to cheat on my wife in my sleep. Well, you had someone like Sean Strickland come out and say, you get a free pass. It's in your sleep. I don't know what the rules on that are in your sleep, I guess, but Moving along from that, I digress. You have a response from John Silva who says, Bryce, there's two things here. These are not demons. It's just you being afraid to face me. And second, about the beautiful women, you have a hormone called testosterone, and you probably have problems with it. Just be ready for April 12th, because I will be. I mean, I don't think that Gene Silva's necessarily wrong. I think that some of that is just general. I don't know that it's him sending underworld legions of demons from some sort of devil or satanic place. It is natural that he should be fearing or should be having a large deal of anxiety leading into this matchup against Gene Silva, especially with the way that Gene Silva has been able to put away guys in his recent run here in the UFC. Yeah, that should be fear. But, to say that it's the whole spirituality aspect, just make of that what you will, being that it's coming from Bryce Mitchell. And lastly here, Conor McGregor was at the White House yesterday meeting with President Trump to raise the issues that the people of Ireland face. I don't know how much productivity was gained from Conor being there or speaking to it, but I do know that if a bag of white girl gets found at the White House this time, we definitely know whose it was. Now to close out the hour, we're going to go 3 rounds. Got my man Danny Bailey behind the glass for me. First round, my friend, what do we have?
Nate Diaz teases a UFC comeback, saying he is aiming for a title run and doesn't even know who the 170 champ is. What are your thoughts on Nate's comments?
It's on brand for Nate in general, because there's been multiple times where he was in the UFC and he still said stuff along those lines, like, who's the champ right now? Like, all these guys are boring. Like, I do exciting fights. I don't do the boring, just eke it out for the business decision type of wins type. He's not wrong in some of that. And part of the play on that is, the constant rib on Bilal. What's Bilal's nickname? Well, his nickname has always been Remember the Name, but the running joke amongst the fans and the blogosphere and the Reddit threads and so on and so forth has always been, well, nobody remembers the name. Bilal is so underwhelming that they don't remember the name. Even literally, as he was being called into the cage as the champion, security did not allow him. Joe Rogan has the emphasis sound clip. Security doesn't know he's the champion. Let him in. That's Bilal. Now, I just asked that in that sense of, you can say, oh, well, security didn't want an altercation, whatever, blah, blah, blah. That was Bilal's retort. But if that was Izzy coming into the cage, they're letting Izzy come in. If that's Kamaru, if that's Connor, if that's any of the others, like we've seen so many other times where that champion comes in and has the face-off, that's never really been held up, but it was for Bilal. So, again, it's not always ipso fact, but, that is what it is there. Moving along.
Luke Thomas of Morning Combat made waves by saying, once this crop of lightweights at the top of the division are gone, the next generation will not surpass them. What are your thoughts on the lightweight division and Luke's comments?
I've been screaming it from the top ropes that we need to appreciate the greats that we have in the game right now while they're still here and while they last. Top dogs, that kind of pentagon at the top that we've had over the last few years at 155 might be the most violently entertaining crop of fighters ever in any division for that particular run that they have. I don't know that they can be surpassed. I really don't. Just being plain and simple. That's sometimes when you start looking at, a particular run of an era of one team, can you ever surpass the run in terms of the greatness of the 20 years that the New England Patriots had? Can you ever surpass the dominance of the 90s Chicago Bulls? Some of those sorts of things. There's going to be some great that happens beyond that, but can you ever achieve what those guys did in that moment to have the star power, the highlights, the draw collectively, and the mainstream appeal? I don't know if that they can. There's a lot of very entertaining and talented prospects out there, but will they be able to surpass what guys like Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev, how are they going to be able to surpass what those guys did? Highly doubtful.
Former Bellator champ Yaroslav Amosov just pulled off a first-round anaconda choke against UFC vet Curtis Millender at CFFC 140, and he pleaded his case to be signed to the UFC should he get the call.
Absolutely. However, I don't know what sort of global politics may play a role into this particular decision here. And let me just give you a little bit of a rundown here on Yaroslav Amosov. Yaroslav Amosov is Amosov, I should say. He's 31 years old. He's 28-1. He's a former Bellator champion. His only loss in that 28-1 is to Jason Jackson, where he lost his Bellator title. He was one of those guys who, upon the PFL merger, was had asked for his release and was granted such. This is where the global politics and aspect come into play, because in most cases, you probably look at that and you say, oh, a guy who is, prior to last weekend's events, he's 27-1 and was on the better side of 35. He's a prime candidate to get signed, right? This is where the catch is. He's Ukrainian. He left and vacated for a time in Bellator while he was the title holder to go fight the war on the front lines on the home front as a soldier. How does the geopolitics of everything come into play? I mean, I would like to say that it isn't a factor that doesn't play a role in whether or not he gets signed, but it's not a perfect world. There are things that go into some of these decisions. We already talked about Bilal earlier in the program, but Bilal was just talking about how the UFC doesn't display his flag, the Palestinian flag, on his profile, on the website, or on any of his media. There are certain things where, especially we look back a couple of years ago when they took everybody's flags away, that was directly based on this Ukraine and Russia situation. How do those things factor in with Yaroslav? I don't know. But as a fighter, I do believe that that's a great story to bring him in. Is he a major draw, especially stateside, for the numbers, or does he move the needle? Not right now, but you have the potential to go out there and sell that story, to go out there to sell the story that he was, willing to go fight for his country, leave a title behind. There's the video that they showed years ago of him going back to where the rubble of where his stuff was stored, and he pulls the belt out from just the rubble of things where it was just pure destruction. That's a story that I think from a human interest side of things you can build, but there are a lot of factors that are bigger than just the cage that are going to go into that signing. Just like that, though, folks, we are all out of time. I want to say thank you so much for tuning in with us each and every week here for this original combat sports programming. Do you have any events that are striking you up on the coming front that you want to hear us talk about, or go a little bit more in the details? Make sure that you hit us up. That is either at Mile High Sports or me, Jordan Kurtz, at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. Want to thank the whole Mile High Sports crew. Make sure that you smash that like and subscribe button wherever that you possibly can. Thank you to my man, Danny Bailey, behind the boards, holding it down for me each and every week. I'm Jordan Kurtz. Give me a follow at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. This is the MMA Plug, presented to you by Mile High Sports.